Hello, everybody. So we're back again to answer folks' questions. But first, Angela and I want to tell you what's on our minds. I think the top of my mind right now is the passing of Karen Lewis, who was head of the Chicago Teachers Union when they led that strike several years ago that kind of sparked a lot of strikes and actions by teachers unions across the country at a time when they were really under attack by the forces of privatization and high stakes testing. And what she did leading that union was build ties between the teachers and the community. So when they went out on strike, the people of Chicago were with her. And Rahm Emanuel was isolated. With all his money and the whole Democratic machine, they beat him. And she's had brain cancer for a while. She's been, fighting that, or was fighting that until this week. And I miss her. I actually went to college with her. I went to Dartmouth, and as it was turning co-ed, she transferred in. There was like 2,000 men there, so 25 women. We knew all the women. So I knew who Karen Lewis was. I don't think she had a clue who I was. But, and then I got to hear her speak at a Labor Notes conference one year, and she'll be sorely missed. And she leaves a great legacy that is now an issue when Chicago teachers are talking about going back out on strike because they're being forced to go back to work without being vaccinated, without the schools being necessarily safe. That's an issue all across the country. And I'm with the teachers. It's better to be safe than sorry. It's a real problem when people have to go online to get their, young kids and do their schoolwork. And it's not everybody has equal access, but it's better to stay healthy and alive to learn another day than to get sick and maybe, get either a permanent disabling from COVID or get killed. So that's an issue that we need to stay on top of. Another thing on my mind is, Biden's foreign policy. He's, doing the low-hanging fruit right now and his executive orders and reversing some Trump things. But on foreign policy, no change. Right now, he said he wanted to, restore that Iran nuclear deal. But now he's in this stupid thing with Iran saying, they're both saying, you go first. Iran's saying, lift the sanctions and we'll talk. And Biden's saying, stop enriching uranium and we'll talk. Of course, under the nuclear deal, they could continue enriching uranium for nuclear power plants, which I don't necessarily support, but that was the deal. So it seems like they're putting obstacles up that are unnecessary. We know the U.S. is still backing Juan Guaido, the U.S. appointed next president of Venezuela, that, a lot of countries around the world that did give him recognition that pulled, but not the United States. So we still have this aggressive regime change policy toward Venezuela. There's a big upheaval in Haiti. People say the current president's term is up, but the U.S. is backing this president saying, no, he's got another year. And they're going against the popular movement in Haiti.
Imagine that.
They're going, the U.S., ever since the Haitian Revolution, the only revolution in history where the slaves overthrew the masters and took control of their country. And we fought them every inch of the way since and still doing it. The U.S. is going ahead with these hypersonic nukes, a $100 billion program, which is very destabilizing. And then, and I've mentioned this before, Biden is, he's got his executive order out on climate change, which is sort of laying some policies and telling different groups in the government to come up with some proposals that they'll try to get funded. But my concern is they put John Kerry on the National Security Council as the climate envoy. And his organization, what was it called? Zero something. That was his, nonprofit base between administrations. And when he got appointed, that organization said, great, here's what we need. We need more detention camps for immigrants because there are going to be more climate refugees. And we got to fight China over the oil and gas in the South China Sea and Russia over the oil and gas in the Arctic Ocean. So they are taking a militarized response to climate in that respect. So I think that's something we got to watch. Very concerned about that. And then after the demonstrations, after George Floyd was killed and all the demands made, the police are still killing and brutalizing people at the same rate. We had those cases in Columbus, up here in New York, Rochester. A 9-year-old child was pepper sprayed in the face after the officer was saying, you're acting like a child. And she said, I am a child. And he pepper sprayed her. Now, they've been suspended, but that is inexcusable. So I will be hosting a live stream on Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern, with Larry Redmond, who is the guy that wrote the legislation in Chicago for community control of the police. I think they need 25 alder members to support it, and they have something like 19. He'll explain that. He's a Green. He tried to run for Congress, couldn't get his petition done this year, but he's very intimately knowledgeable of the fight they've had in Chicago, which of course has had notorious police brutality, including torturing people to get confessions and, you know, paying out millions and millions of dollars every time officers get shown to have brutalized or killed people unnecessarily. So the issues are still there. What's on your mind, Angela?
I want to send big love to Karen Lewis, to everyone who loved her. Rise in power. I had the pleasure and the honor of doing a lot of work with the Chicago Teachers Union, mighty CTU. You know, big love coming out of Milwaukee, working around school privatization, because as you know, Milwaukee is facing and has faced some of the same issues as far as, you know, these privatizers play by the same playbook. And, you know, we have the same issues in Milwaukee with, you know, school privatization and the predatory way our communities are treated. And so I did a lot of work with the CTU and got a lot of love for them. So rise in power, Ms. Karen. I also just thinking about, you know, because it was also in the chat and someone was asking where we stand. I think it's kind of obvious, but where we stand on what happened to the child in Rochester. I mean, it's unconscionable. And even bigger than that, this is a country that believes and has always put forth that Black children are disposable. Black children are expendable. Black children are not children. The fact that this baby had to tell the cops that she is a child, they don't look at her and see a child. That is what this country is built on for us. And I was listening to This Is Revolution podcast, the homie Jason Miles. And one of the guests that was on today was, or this particular podcast was, I want to see Jeff Kennedy, who is an educator out of Washington, D.C., who has done decades and decades and decades of work on eugenics and how pervasive eugenics is in the predatory policies that we have seen basically take over our public schools and this push the idea that our schools are failing, not that they have been failed, but that they are failing and that the neighborhoods around them are failing, and creates this culture of disposability for people who are in public school, for people who work in public school, for people who support public schools. So this is a very, very huge, very pervasive thing. I urge all of y'all to read, or not to read, Lord, I'm looking at the chat, to listen. The link is in the chat. It was mind blowing how pervasive this stuff is. I want to thank everybody that joined us on Saturday. We had a live stream around reparations, and a very excellent discussion with Brother Ajamu Umi out of California and Sister Asante Nkrumah Ture, who is a member of the Green Party. Hey, sis. And a member of the All African People's Party. Amazing work. So if y'all can, it should be on YouTube, but it was an amazing discussion. My homie Gara Brown was there, Tatame, all my Green family. So yeah, those are the things that are on my mind. I think that one of the things that, because it is Black History Month and a lot of things come bubbling up to the surface, I think that it's just important to know what our history is in order to move forward, because we're still fighting these same battles. They're coming.
We're
Questions
waiting
are
for questions, right?
They're coming. Hey, Daniel Sadat, welcome. At Howie Hawkins, will you run again in 2024?
It's too early to say. We'll look at that in a couple of years. Right now, I'm focused on helping local Green parties get better organized, local candidates run better campaigns, and doing political education on the issues, the policies, the perspectives from a Green socialist point of view. And also where people want to run issue campaigns. The thing I'm focused on is ranked choice voting here in New York and encouraging Greens around the country. There's a real movement now. There are like campaigns in 20 states. And that's a game changer for us. I mean, you can go back, and I'm writing an article right now. There's a chart that another guy put together. Left third parties have always been marginal in presidential elections since the Liberty Party ran in 1840. We have put issues on the table that got into the mainstream eventually. But the dynamic is people are afraid, if they're on the left, of the far right, the Republicans. So they vote for the Democrats to stop the Republicans. The Democrats take the left for granted, both us outside and those inside, the AOCs and the Bernie Sanders. They don't have leverage. AOC lost in a vote by the Policy and Steering Committee of the Democratic Caucus, 46-13 to a conservative Democrat when she tried to get on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which would deal with Medicare for all and the Green New Deal. That shows you the balance of forces. The centrists like Biden can take the progressives for granted because they don't see an exit strategy, no threat to take their vote. And this dynamic, 180 years since the Liberty Party ran, we got to change the system. Now, we can build our forces up like the Republicans did, building on the Liberty Party and the Free Soil Party in the 1850s, but that took a couple decades. And we don't have time with climate change, inequality, nuclear arms. We got to make changes faster than that. So I think ranked choice voting is the game changer, not just for presidential elections, for example, but for legislative bodies from multi-winner districts using ranked choice voting. That would be a game changer. And then the Greens would definitely be part of the discussion, and people who are on the left could vote for the left without worrying about helping the Republicans. That's the problem that for the last 180 years has hamstrung the left and why we don't have a left in this country. So I forgot what the original question was, but what was the question? Oh, am I running? No, I'm working on these issues for now, and we'll see what it looks like in a couple of years.
You gave the most in-depth answer that anybody could possibly give. It was pretty dope. Trent Allen. Hey, snap. Rise up, Colorado. I am registered as an independent voter in Colorado. I always vote green in a general election, but there are not many green primaries here. Independent voters are able to vote in Democratic primaries in Colorado, however. Should I register as a green or should I stay the course I am on? Question.
Well, you should register as a green because the Greens have internal processes and votes to designate their candidates. So it's not a state-run primary, but there's a process. And if you want to have a say in that, you got to be a green.
We got Mobile, Alabama Green Party in the house. What's up? Forrest Beeser, I saw this in the chat. Hello, any real chance of DC or Puerto Rico becoming states in the next 4 years?
Well, I think DC for sure. The Democrats, they're going to whip their people until they're bleeding to get that vote. Puerto Rico is more complicated because a lot of people in Puerto Rico want independence. And they really haven't had a referendum that the independence people and the pro-statehood people and the pro-status quo people all agreed to. It's up to the Puerto Ricans. It's not up to the Congress to impose it on Puerto Rico when they haven't made up their own mind yet. So on the other hand, Democrats might whip their people and do it anyway, but that would be an injustice. You know, the Puerto Ricans got to make that decision.
Hey, Sugar. Not a spectacular, welcome, is asking, can we put some Greens in Congress? Would do wonders to sway the Overton window.
Yeah, it would. And we might could get one or two, like with plurality winner systems in Canada and England. They got Caroline Lucas in the UK, and they got Theresa May, is that her name? In Canada, as a member of parliament. And it would shift the Overton window. We would have a voice with a platform. But we got to find a race we could win and put a lot of resources into it. You know, the long road is the old Republican Party model. We build up local elected people who can then get into state legislatures and the House. But that takes a long time. If we got ranked choice voting, if we got the Fair Representation Act passed, which is a bill in Congress that would set up multi-member districts using ranked choice voting, and you would get proportional representation of the different parties. If that passed, we would have Greens in Congress. And I think that's the faster route. Although we're going to have to get to the congressional level by getting it passed in more cities and states. We're now at 38 cities and 2 states. And hopefully in the next couple of years, we're going to get a bunch more, and we can force that issue onto the national agenda.
Roxanne, can you say hi? Hi.
Hi.
In the mood for real history. What are y'all's views? Thank you for y'all. Appreciate that. What are y'all's views on modern monetary theory and the benefits that a federal job guarantee can present not only for economic justice, but racial justice as well? I'm paraphrasing you, baby. I look forward to seeing y'all each week.
Well, we're definitely for a federal job guarantee, expanding something like the Works Progress Administration that operated during the Green New Deal, scaling it up. So every person who can't find a job in the private sector goes to the employment office instead of the unemployment office and says, I want my job. And those projects are, for the most part, developed by local communities. And they're on the shelf. 10% funded by the local community, 90% by the federal government. That's how they did it in the Works Progress Administration. Modern monetary theory says that until you get to full employment, you can deficit spend on the things the people need without worrying about inflation. And I think that's accurate. The modern monetary theory people, although they think you can do that under capitalism indefinitely. And the problem is the private sector won't invest unless they see profits. So I don't think it works as well as some of the pro-capitalist modern monetary theory people think it will. But in terms of immediate needs and the need to deficit spend to get us out of this depression, get everybody a job, implement a Green New Deal, go to Medicare for all, which will actually save money, and these other programs we're talking about, yeah, modern monetary theory explains why we don't need to worry about the deficit because we can afford to carry the service costs and interest rates are low, and we can carry that deficit, and we don't have to worry about inflation until we get to full employment and full use of the capacity of the economy.
Josue Gonzalez, hey baby. Howie Hawkins, what are your thoughts? I'm paraphrasing you, baby. What are your thoughts on today's World Ag Expo? Where is the hemp?
I don't know about the World Ag Expo. I do know that the Biden administration, by appointing Tom Vilsack, who's a shill for corporate agribusiness, is basically adding fuel to the fire of climate change, global warming, and running more farmers off the land so that they are now more and more becoming tenant farmers to Wall Street investors. We got to get absentee corporate ownership of farms. We got to ban that. We got to help farmers transition to organic, provide the subsidies for that, guarantee them a living income through parity pricing, which basically means the parity prices covers your cost of production plus enough income to support a modest standard of living. And that price goes up and down with the cost of production. That is key. And it, there are farm organizations that have been advocating that going back to the 80s. And what we really need is what they're doing in India, where the farmers are demanding repeal of the privatization and marketization of agriculture there and opening it up more and more to corporate agribusiness and going for the kind of program I just outlined. And yeah, where is the hemp? Hemp is now legal. It should be central. Hemp has so many uses, from paper and cloth and food, soap, fuel, and there's even research on using it instead of lithium as for supercapacitors in batteries. It's the fibers of the bark of the hemp that have they can be much more powerful supercapacitors than lithium in batteries. And you can Google that, and it's been around for about 15 years. The question is, why hasn't much money gone into that avenue for batteries? And I think the answer to that is we have investment done by private capitalists looking for a quick buck instead of a eco-socialist system where we can take the long view and make long-term investments without having to get a fast return. Venture capitalists got a time horizon of 3 to 5 years. The public sector can take a longer time to get, to pay off so that what you're investing in pays off in the long run.
Roberto Loredo, hello. I'm all over the place tonight. At Howie Hawkins, what are your and the Green Party's views on gun ownership and the right to bear arms, especially for the working and middle class?
I've been answering all the questions, Angela. I know you got an answer for that.
I'm brain fried on this. And don't let me misspeak. You and I have had discussions about gun ownership. We support the Second Amendment, that people do have the right to, keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment. We do have an issue with assault rifles. Folks having assault rifles, you're not hunting with that. It's not something that you're protecting the house with. They are, as Howie and I, who are people who have, at some point train with those weapons and use those weapons. We know that they're designed with the intent to kill a whole lot of people very quickly. I remember training with an M16 and hoping that I would never have to use that on any living thing. So we do support the Second Amendment. I do believe, shout out to, and this is me, I'm not speaking for Howie, I'm speaking for me, organizations like the Huey P. Newton Gun Club, I'm giving them mad love, because I think that there is a place for armed self-defense in the left. But that is me. I am not speaking for Howie. I am not speaking for the Green Party. I am speaking for me. Howie, you want to add to that?
Well, obviously, we have the right to self-defense. There wouldn't have been a civil rights movement if the Deacons for Defense and other armed groups were defending the nonviolent actions, the meetings to organize and plan those nonviolent actions, because the Klan would have broke them up. And as it worked out, a few shots in the air and the Klan scattered.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So that was necessary for that movement. They didn't initiate violence, but they were defending themselves. And I knew a guy that was a veteran of the Spanish Civil War. He was from the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. His name escapes me right now. He lived to a ripe old age. He died a few years ago. But he went down to Mississippi and ended up in the Civil Rights Movement. He was sent over to Fannie Lou Hamer's house. And the first thing she did was hand him a pistol and said, "Clean it." So a lot of the activists were bearing arms. When Bayard Rustin went to Martin Luther King's house, and Bayard was a big nonviolent action guy, he said, "This is an arsenal. You got to get rid of these guns. It's not the right image." But there was protection for Martin Luther King. So obviously, we have the right to defend ourselves. As far as public policy goes, I'm fine with the Heller decision, where the Supreme Court said people have the right, law-abiding people have the right to rifles, pistols, and shotguns. And the public has the right to regulate those, how you get them and how they're registered and regulated in the interest of public safety. So then, the devil gets in the details. I'm for background checks for all transfers of arms. I agree with Angela that we don't want assault rifles out on the street. I haven't touched one since I turned in my M16 when I was a Marine. And, those are weapons of war designed to kill. They're not for self-defense or hunting. So that's about where I'm at.
And I'm also going to throw it here in the chat because President Eco is made the comment, "Stop the mental slavery. People are equal." It must be nice to live in a world where it's like that. Weapons are the tool of the fossil fuel militias. There won't be any weapons. How dumb does whatever have to be to carry one? That just shows that maybe that's your reality, darling. But there are a whole lot of folks who live in communities that are occupied by the state, where there are situations that require people to be safe. Just like what Howie was referencing, the part of the 60s civil rights movement, people like to glorify all of these other things, but what they don't talk about is there was absolutely an armed component to that movement, because everyone, and my family comes out of Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas. My people knew, the thing you want to push, when those night riders come into your town, and we're talking about the Klan, come into your neighborhood, the thing that pushes them back is the fact that you are clapping back. And so, to make the comment that, oh, it's very dismissive. This is mental slavery and no one needs weapons. I hate to break this to you, but as long as the power structure is armed, the people gonna need to be too. Moving on.
Yeah, I don't think the Deacons for Defense were dumb.
At all.
Was not dumb. And a single woman in a high crime neighborhood, she wants a pistol to defend herself. That's not dumb.
So moving on. Cubehead, welcome. How do you feel about Marjorie Taylor?
Yeah, you know what she said today? It wasn't the Trump supporters that invaded the Capitol. I mean, that woman is dumb as a rock. You talk about dumb. That woman is dumb, and she's off living in a fantasy world of all these conspiracy theories. And, the Republicans, they're moving to the right. They're buying into all that stuff. I mean, right now, it looks to me like it's still Trump's party. After the Capitol's invaded, 139 members of the House voted against certification of the vote, as if the election was stolen, as if all those recounts and all that close examination came up with no evidence of fraud. And they keep saying it's fraud, or they believe it's fraud because Trump said so. The guy that, according to the Washington Post, told over 30,000 lies in 4 years. Yeah, I feel she's as dumb as a rock.
Now I'm going to ask a real stupid question because I'm just not hooked into social media these days because I don't have the bandwidth. Who is Marjorie Taylor?
Marjorie Taylor Greene, that woman from Georgia, the QAnon congresswoman.
That's why I don't know anything about. I have no idea what that is. I got you.
Well, she was stripped of all her committees by the Democrats. The Republicans put her on the education committee. And so the Democrats said no. They wish the Republicans had taken care of it like they did with that Stephen King, the racist from Iowa, who they stripped of their committees after he said one thing that was just too outrageous. But no, she's racist, anti-Semitic, buys into every community conspiracy theory that comes along. Pizzagate. She said that the school shootings at Parkland and the one up in Connecticut were false flag operations. I mean, she's out there with Alex Jones, kind of crazy.
Got it. She sounds fun. Got it. I was just like, who is this person? And the way you smiled when the question was asked, I was like, okay, this is gonna be good. But yeah, nah, not good. Not good. Hey, I saw this question earlier in the chat. MPJ 12345. Why do you think no self-described progressives? I'm gonna be as I will be as diplomatic with this as I possibly can. Why do you think no self-described progressives have switched to the Greens once in office? Has the Green Party ever courted such a move?
Actually, some have. People elected as Democrats. There was a guy in New Jersey to the state assembly, and he just decided the Democrats were so corrupt, he couldn't be associated. So he switched to Green. He was not reelected. It happened in Maine. It happened in Arkansas. So there have been a few. And, I think there are progressives in the Democratic Party that would be much happier in the Green Party. They're just worried they can't get reelected. So I keep the door open.
I second it. I like how you put that. I was going to say something much more scathing. And I probably shouldn't. Whew. Psychology. Hey, darling. Have you considered, your Lord Jesus, have you considered trying to get a celebrity endorsement for the party? Okay. Unfortunately, a good portion of the population only respond to the social media popularity consensus. Can we please kill celebrity culture? Can we do that? We just endured well, it wasn't even 8 years. It just felt like it. 4 years of a reality show personality in the highest office in this country. Can we please kill celebrity culture? And we reached out to Ice Cube because we were asked to. And the fact that the things that he was talking about, we had answers for them. It wasn't because, ooh, celebrity. I'm not worried about the people. It was about, you're looking for a party or, somewhere that might actually be lifting up the things that you're asking for. We have those things. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already here. That is why we did that. But this idea that you need for a political party, the thing that will get people to rally around you is you need a big name. You give me the calm dude with the doable plan, the budget for that plan, over the bombastic bread and circuses garbage that we deal with on a daily basis any day. Give me Howie Hawkins. Give me somebody that's behind the scenes, that has a workable plan over all of this bombast. And I understand, getting a celebrity endorsement, those things are helpful. We spoke with a number of well-named people. And at the end of the day, people are going to go with what is most politically expedient for them. And that is not always in the best interest of what it is that we stand for. So can we please kill celebrity worship culture? Can we do that? Howie?
Well, celebrities are no shortcut. We ran a celebrity for president in 2000. Ralph Nader had nearly universal name recognition. He had high favorabilities after decades of work fighting for the people and winning progressive reforms at the federal level in a lot of states. And he had a boatload of progressive celebrities endorse him. He ended up with 2.74%, which is the best the Greens have ever done, but still marginal to the whole thing. What we need is a mass party where we are in neighborhoods and people know who we are and they trust us. And they vote for the Greens because they know regular folks like them are fighting with them on their concerns. Celebrities are nice, but they don't really add that much. We have people saying, the Greens should run Jesse Ventura, even though he's, a fiscal conservative, which means austerity for the poor people. And he wants a flat tax. He wants a value-added tax, which, given our current inequality in taxation, where labor income is taxed more than capital income, and he's against the wars, and he's kind of a libertarian and with us on some other issues. But so we had, a renegade party in Alaska put him on the ballot, and he was marginal to the whole thing too. Celebrity is not the answer.
Cheddar Bob, do you have any advice for people planning to run green? I'll give you to the OG.
Well, first of all, get involved in your community. So you're one of those people the community knows is fighting for the people. And then when you're ready to run, you got to have a team. You need a campaign manager to coordinate everything. You need a treasurer because you got to do financial reports. And if you don't do them, you're going to get fined and, have a whole lot more work than you bargained for. And then when you run, you got to go out and talk to the people. You got to knock on doors, or in this COVID environment, at least phone people. And don't so much tell them what your plans are, but listen. People, the major party politicians really don't have to campaign, because once the machine designates them, if they're, most districts are one-party districts where one or the other major party is the majority. So the major party candidate coasts to victory and the minor party candidate doesn't really try. But the Greens can make a difference by trying and bringing issues to the table, which the major party candidate in that district doesn't want to talk about. And if you will find, if you get into races, particularly at the local level, the major party candidates don't know what the hell they're talking about. You know, being in office for them is a business proposition. It's about getting contracts to their friends and getting paid off other ways later. It's pretty corrupt. So there's a lot of room for the Greens, not just with our progressive and socialist ideas, but just plain good, honest government that's not corrupt. But when you go out and listen, nobody listens to them. And sometimes people will just, they'll talk to you for half an hour, just pour it all out. And they may not even agree with you on policy, but the fact that you listen, they respect.
Yes.
And they feel like, well, if they're in office, I got somebody I can go to. So those are some of my ideas. And I would say these local races are really important. We can do a lot in municipal government in this country because of our federal system. Local governments have a lot of powers. They got procurement, they got taxation, they got hiring, they got a budget. They can take things over by eminent domain for the public purpose. So, if a business that the community needs, a grocery store, a factory wants to close, the city can take it over by eminent domain in the public interest to keep those jobs there. It's part of a eco-socialist, municipal socialist program. So there's a lot we can do at the local level. And by doing it there, we demonstrate what we can do. So then we can run people on that same kind of program for state legislature and for the U.S. House. So my advice is be involved in your community, let people know who you are, you're on their side, and then when you run, you really got to go out. And when you talk to people, and once you get a sense of where they stand, keep a list. So when election day comes around, you get your people out to vote. I mean, that's electoral politics 101, but a lot of Greens don't do it. We've won over 1,200 races over the years, but we should have won a lot more. We can win thousands of these local offices. There's 500,000 or so local offices in the country. Many, many of them go uncontested. So there's a lot of room to run, and good luck.
Hey, Scott Glab, to both of you, what are your views on the fully informed jury amendment and its relevance to current political discourse?
Well, what that refers to is juries can acquit people if they think that's the most just outcome, even if strictly under the law and the evidence they are guilty. This has come up for those of us on the progressive side in civil disobedience actions. And there have been cases where juries let people off even though they know they committed the crime. Some states have a competing harms law where you break a law in order to prevent a greater harm. When we started the anti-nuclear movement in New England, a guy named Sam Lovejoy knocked down a weather tower by pulling the guy wires out to stop preparing for a nuclear power plant site. And he went to trial and said, yeah, I did it, but the nuclear power plant would be worse. And the jury let him off. Another guy in our Clamshell Alliance, Guy Chichester, who gave the Clamshell Alliance its name, the New Hampshire Constitution has a right to revolution clause. And he said he took a chainsaw to some extension of the Seabrook nuclear power plant. I forget exactly what his purpose was, but he knocked this pole down. And he went to the jury and said, I have a right to reject a government that didn't listen to the people in building this nuclear power plant. The jury let him off. So I think the fully informed part means the judge should give instructions to juries that they have that right. And that is not something that I don't think exists in any state. It may in one or two states, but so that's what I think about I guess a fully informed jury amendment would be a change in the law so that judges would have to inform juries of that right.
I think it might change the trajectory in a whole lot of cases. if something like that were to happen. So I think that's pretty interesting. I love this question. I got so excited, especially thinking about, us lifting up the CTU and the work that's being done, and also the talk about eugenics and its impact on public schools. Eric Gray, perfect question. Hey, darling. At Howie Hawkins and Angela Walker, thoughts on community control of education where communities train and develop their own teachers. Makes me so excited. Makes me so excited. I have been saying for years, that the community schools model for our public schools is something that we need to have. If your school is situated in a community, which our schools are situated in the community, schools should be the heart of those communities. And every resource that community needs should be available in that school. And also, I think that we are at a place where we really need to be questioning, really need to be redefining what it means to educate and be educated. And I have advocated personally for, if you've got a community school, that school should reflect the community that it serves. Those teachers, those educators, those students, those, their families, whomever, caregivers, everyone should have a say in how that school operates, what it teaches, what the curriculum looks like, what the building itself looks like, what the grounds look like, how they serve the community. So for me, long story short, I absolutely get excited thinking about community control of education, where communities train, develop their own teachers, and also have a say in, what curricula are produced, what materials are brought in or developed to do the education. I think that we're, especially during this pandemic when we've had to do so many untraditional things around school, and also like the unschooling movement and things like that. I think we're at a place where we need to start talking about what something like this could look like. Howie, what you got?
Well, I think part of this issue is the fact that in large school districts, in segregated cities, which most of them are, the Black and Latino schools in particular are really run by either the citywide bureaucracy, they're subject to mandates coming from the state and the federal government, not responsive to the needs of the community. So back in the late 60s, there was a movement for community control of the schools. It became a big conflict in New York City between mostly white school teachers and mostly Black parents, particularly in Brooklyn. And we gotta let these oppressed communities have more say in what goes on in their own schools.
And opt out of standardized testing.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about. When the federal government comes in with standardized tests, they basically test, they basically litmus test for what social class you come from. So low income minority communities tend to get low test scores. And then the system says, oh, your schools are failing. So we're going to shut them down and make you go to charter schools, which are private schools. I don't care. They may be public funded, but Lockheed Martin is public funded. That doesn't make it a public institution. It has a contract. These are private schools. And there have been so many ripoffs and fraud and failure. I mean, you look at use the test scores. Charter school kids do no better than public school kids. And you get ripoffs like New Orleans after Katrina.
Ooh.
That was disaster capitalism. They shut down the public school system and made it all private, all charters. And the kids are doing no better in the charter schools than they were in the public schools. So, yeah, community control is not just community schools with wraparound services. It's community empowerment, particularly in the oppressed communities, where the system has not served their needs.
We love that question. Santino Musto. Hello, darling. My question is, do you believe we should get a COVID-19 vaccine ASAP, Or should we wait and let scientists develop it more? I'll let you have the first stab at that because I need to think about how I want to say what I need to say.
I say get vaccinated. It's a public health issue. It's your own health issue. And the vaccines are working. There haven't been major negative consequences any more than any other vaccine. Get vaccinated.
I support people who want to be vaccinated getting the vaccine. I absolutely do. And people who, people like my 81-year-old grandmother who's in Florida, I know that the vaccines have been running short. They're on backlog. I have my personal concerns, but what I absolutely, if it is available to you and it is something that you feel is in your best interest to take, I want you to make sure you have it. Marks suck. Okay. What can we do on an individual level to help the environment?
I think the most important thing you can do is get involved in a movement for a real serious climate action program like the Green New Deal, on environmental measures like moving from petroplastics to bioplastics. We're going to have to adapt to climate change. Salt wetlands are inundated over the next decades. We're going to have to figure out a way to reconstruct them on higher ground. There are so many issues. We are not going to be able to shop our way out of the environmental crisis or out of the climate crisis. You got to, for example, in most cities, they don't have good public transportation. You need a car to get to work, to get to school, to get to your food, to get to the pharmacy, to get to your friends. And so you can pick to get a electric vehicle if you can afford it, but it's still a lot of resources and a lot of energy being consumed much less efficiently than a affordable, convenient public transportation system. So we got to change the system, not just our shopping habits. So what individuals should do is get involved in the movement.
I'm geeked. My auntie is in the chat. What? Chris Connor. That's my second mama. That's my auntie. Do you have a plan or model to teach real American history in schools? And that's something she has been railing on forever. Like, is y'all, can we stop with the falsified textbooks? And looking in the chat, our homie in the mood for real history, who's an educator in Alabama, uses Howard Zinn's People's History of the U.S. as his textbook. So I think that when we're talking about revamping education and breaking or ending this war on public schools, which is like multi-pronged, and freeing up teachers to, educators to be able to teach in the way that they did years ago, not be required to teach for standardized testing, not being forced to focus on that. I think that we'll see a lot more of that, where educators are able to bring in resources that they themselves would want to use. So that's just my take on it. What do you think?
Yeah, people need to understand the real history of this country. And this gets back to, local elections. School boards, both at the local level and at the state level, have a lot to say on curriculum. And going back to the Scopes monkey trial, we have this, fundamentalist evangelical white Christian movement that wants people to be stupid. They want them to not believe in evolution. They want them to believe the only history is white history in this country. And they have a lot of power because they have focused on those local elections. The Texas school board, state school board, whatever they call that school commission, has a big say because they're a big market in what gets into textbooks. So if we want real American history taught, we got to get our people in the places where those decisions on curriculum are made. So it's the school boards, both local and state. And then at the federal level, Department of Education, instead of imposing high stakes testing, might set up incentives and grants to make sure that the history of all the people of this country is covered and what really happened is told.
That made me happy. I thought so. Hey, darling. I knew you felt familiar, but yeah, this is our homie. This is our people's. Rob, yeah, we know who you are. Rob D. Rich is asking, Angela, Judas and the Black Messiah, a movie about, oh, you already know, I know. A movie about Fred Hampton comes out Friday, and I'm praying they play it here in Florence, South Carolina. Cross your fingers. How would you explain the importance of socialism in Black communities when Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers are painted as bad people while capitalists are painted as the heroes? And that's a doggone good question, because one of the things that we discussed extensively in the live stream, and you were there for that, Rob, on Saturday, was Black capitalism versus socialism. And the idea or the understanding of Black liberation, that if we are serious about Black liberation, we are also able to understand that it is not going to come under the system that enslaved us, the system that continually oppresses us. We will not receive liberation that way. So, you know, when I'm talking about socialism to my own folks who may not necessarily be socialist, I just bring up the ways that we have always practiced it, whether we called it that or not. You know, making sure that, you know, maybe you don't know these people, you know, next to you or whomever, but when we eat, they eat too. If I know somebody in the community needs something, we got something, we pool our resources, we make sure we take care of our own. That's socialism on a very simple level. And so, you know, a lot of the times when I talk about, you know, the ways that our communities have practiced socialism, and we have a long history of it as Black people in this country, people tend to get their hackles down. Like, oh, okay, I know what that is, without necessarily calling it, you know, a label. And so, and then you know, when I'm talking about the Panthers, you bring up the fact that we have a breakfast program nationally for young people, for school children in this country, that came directly out of what the Panthers were doing in like apartments and public housing, feeding kids before they went to school, you know, and talking about the work that, you know, the Panthers did around self-protection, around, you know, housing justice, things where they, you know, and coalition building and really important things. And when you bring that up to folks and remind them that what we've been taught about the Panthers in this country is propaganda for a reason. For a reason. You can't lift these folks up as heroes because these are people who are very explicit about overthrowing this system of oppression. Of course, they're the enemy. And so sometimes it's just about reframing and making sure that we are being honest, you know, at least for me, I'm an unapologetic socialist. So I talk about issues with folks and how we do this in practice versus theory. And a lot of times people get their backs down. What do you think, Howie?
Well,
that's a dang good question.
You know, Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party are painted as bad people while capitalists are painted as heroes, when the opposite is true. And so we got to tell the truth and explain what happened. I see a comment in the chat saying this movie doesn't talk about the Panthers' socialist politics. I have a hunch it's about a lot about the FBI infiltration and the setup of the murder of Fred Hampton by the Chicago police and the FBI, which is a story. But Why were they so afraid of Fred Hampton? Fred Hampton was an incredible leader of the Black Panthers, and he built alliances with the Young Lords, Puerto Rican group, and
Young Patriots.
Young Patriots, some hillbillies from Kentucky and places like that, who they were running around with Confederate flags. But Fred Hampton said, these are working people. I can see they're oppressed too. We're going to build a relationship. And over time, those Young Patriots took down their Confederate flags because they realized it was offensive to their Black comrades. That's why Fred Hampton was feared by the FBI and the Chicago police. He was even organizing the gangs in Chicago, the Vice Lords, the Blackstone Rangers, and what was the other one on the South Side? The Black Disciples, LSD. They built a coalition, LSD, Lord Stones and Disciples. And Fred Hampton was in the middle of that. That scared the hell out of Richard Daley, the mayor, because he came from a gang. It's called the Hamburgers. They were a white gang that attacked Black people during the bloody summer of 1919 after World War I, when these white people were trying to get Black people out of jobs they'd been able to get during the war. And Daley knew that a gang could turn into a political organization. And I know a lot more about that, but I'll stop there. The other thing I think we can explain to Black communities is that, you know, Angela talked about how just at the practical everyday level, people take care of each other. But there has been a socialist movement in the vanguard of Black liberation going back to Reconstruction. There was a cooperative farm of several thousand freed people. It was on the land owned by Jefferson Davis' brother in a bend in the Mississippi River in Mississippi. And it operated successfully during Reconstruction. When the Reconstruction government was overthrown in Mississippi, Jefferson Davis' brother, I forget his name, said, now you got to pay the whole mortgage off now. Of course, they couldn't. They were successful economically. They were servicing the mortgage, but that land was taken from them. In that same period, a lot of Black people moved out to particularly Kansas to set up utopian socialist communities. It was a thing in the second half of the 19th century. It wasn't just a white thing. Black people were doing it too. And then you had W.B. Du Bois. You had civil rights icons like A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin, leaders in the Socialist Party. Malcolm X became a socialist. Martin Luther King was a socialist. These were the leaders of Black liberation in that period. And lesser known names coming out of Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and so forth. So it's been important because the socialists are the ones that organized things and got things done. And I think we're talking about history. That's part of the history people need to understand. You know, I remember when Hillary Clinton told Obama, you know, without Lyndon Johnson, civil rights wouldn't have happened. Without a civil rights movement, Lyndon Johnson wouldn't have happened. And people got to understand that.
And yeah, we're seeing it all over the place. I suppose we're getting the cane. It looks like we're getting the cane. All right.
Getting started.
Okay. That was a dang good question. It's a couple of y'all brought some fire questions tonight. You really did. So, Mr. President, what are your thoughts?
We talk about it every week, but this COVID epidemic, we peaked and gone down a little bit, but we got these new strains. And if what happened in England and some of these other countries happens here, we're going to have another wave. So you really got to take care of yourself. The vaccinations are starting to come out, but it's going to take months before we have what they call herd immunity, when enough of us are vaccinated or have immunity that the virus can't spread readily. And so, you know, social distancing, masking, get vaccinated if you can. Just take care of yourself because we need you for the long haul.
I don't know what I can say to top that. Make sure, you know, and it's not just your physical health when we're saying take care of yourself, you know, also take care of your emotional health. This is a hard timeline to live under. Oh my goodness. It's a lot happening and it's all happening very quickly. And, you know, the ground, it feels like the ground under us, you know, is shifting. You know, my people are, a lot of them are in Wisconsin, and I know y'all are like freezing up there. So, you know, and Howie was shoveling snow earlier. So all of y'all who are enduring, you know, it's not super warm down here, but here in South Carolina, but it is not -1. I don't miss it. So all of y'all that are enduring that disrespectful cold, do, you know, make sure that you're wrapping up and make sure that you are taking care of yourselves, you know, emotionally and spiritually. My aunt put the little cold things in the chat. I know it. I ain't coming back up there. Emotionally, spiritually, you know, guard your peace as much as you possibly can. And we'll see you next Tuesday.